Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I make videos about health and fitness and all of those things, endurance sports, so if that's something that you're into, buttons, things, subscribe down below. I'll wait. Okay, you won't. You have better things to do than to sit here in silence and wait for people to subscribe to the channel. But I'll be waiting on the inside because that's what counts. At least that's what my mom told me. I appreciate you hitting the buttons and joining me for this video in my smart-ass sweatshirt. My seasonally appropriate mug. But I do want to talk about a matter of importance. And I want to talk about the most important thing for you to invest in as a cyclist. And no, it is not a fast pair of wheels, it's not a new frame, it's not a new group set, it's not even a power meter. While all of those things are very fun and very effective and can be important in their own right, the most important thing that you can invest in as a cyclist is your safety. And I'm not saying this to be preachy or pedantic. I'm saying this because it bears reminder. It's very easy to lose sight of some of the dangers that come with cycling because cycling is a long-lived pastime. People have been cycling for fun, recreation, and sport for years and years, and they do so at all ages and all ability levels. And it's easy to confuse that commonplace nature of cycling with being inherently safe. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the most prevalent risk when it comes to riding out on the roadways, and that is the fact that we share those roadways with motor vehicles that dwarf our weight and our power by several orders of magnitude. Any adverse interaction between a motor vehicle and a cyclist is going to be very deleterious for the cyclist and their physical well-being. So it's important to keep sight of the fact that we need to protect ourselves in any way, shape, or form possible when it comes to riding out on the roads. The onus is on you as the cyclist to do everything in your power to keep yourself safe. You should be wearing a helmet on your head. That should be a no-brainer to most folks. I don't see very many people kicking back on that anymore as they have in years past. It's not uncool to wear a helmet anymore, but again, sometimes people don't think that they need to wear a helmet. I highly recommend not putting your brains out on the sidewalk. Put a helmet on. You need to be riding on the correct side of the road with the flow of traffic. I can't tell you how many times I see people riding against traffic. They think they are more safe because they can see the cars, but it makes you less predictable to the cars and just sheer physics. If there is an interaction between you and that vehicle, you're going to make it so much worse if you are going in the opposite direction of traffic. You should be riding predictably. You should be following the rules of the road. You should be only taking up the amount of space in the lane that is required for you to do so that a car can pass you safely. You should be signaling your intentions whenever possible, whether you're turning or you're avoiding an obstacle or hazard in the road. You should be doing everything in your power to be seen. You don't have to wear high-vis yellow all the time, but a couple splashes of color in daylight to make it easier for you to be seen. If you're riding at night, some reflective clothing, a taillight, a headlight, blinky, all of that fun stuff. Right? You should be doing everything in your power to give yourself every leg up in terms of safety. But even when you do, and you check all of those boxes, and you are being Mr. or Mrs. Conscientious Cyclist, you are still only marginally increasing your propensity to be safe. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do these things, but the reality is every time you get out on the bike and you're sharing the roadway, what you're doing is you're handing your trust over to the people operating the motor vehicles to keep you safe, because they're the ones in control. You're doing everything, checking those boxes, here I am, look at me, please don't run me down, but at the end of the day, you are handing control over to the drivers, especially the ones coming from your rear, where you are at your most vulnerable, where you can't necessarily see them. And that's why I want to talk about this device here that I've been using for a little while now, and this is the Garmin Varia. And what this thing does is actually it sends a signal behind you, and it gives you an indication both audibly and visually on either your head unit, your cycling computer, or your cell phone, and it tells you when a vehicle has entered that field from behind you. So it gives you a warning so that you can actually make a decision of what you want to do in response to that vehicle. Now, the knee-jerk reaction from some folks is going to be, well, I have a mirror on my bike. Why can't I just use a mirror or a shoulder check, right? Well, the reality is there's still that element of timing. If you've got a mirror on your device, you have to be looking at it for it to be effective, right? And you can't just spend your whole time staring in your mirror, because if you're staring in your mirror, you're not looking in front of you. And there's plenty of hazards to behold in front of you, whether it's crappy roads or vehicles pulling out in front of you. You need to be able to focus on one area at a time. The visual field is not going to be able to process what's behind you and what's in front of you at the same time. You have to shift your focus. So looking at the mirror is kind of a sense of luck and good timing. But what if you had a device that could tell you when to look and where to look? And that is what the Varia is intended to do. It gives you an audible signal on your device, and it shows you a representation on your screen just off to the left. It's not blocking anything off. It's nothing obtrusive. You don't have to read anything. Very simple graphical interface, little white dot. that's coming up from behind you, and it detects that vehicle 140 meters back. That is a football field and a half. If you really think about it, that's a long way. That is no less than 5 seconds to acknowledge that driver and to make a decision. 5 seconds may as well be 5 years compared to the usual response rate that we could have as cyclists out on the road. I mean, that's huge. And the point of this is it puts you in control. Now you are in control of your own destiny and your safety because you have that time to decide. You have the luxury, the gift of that 5 seconds to figure out what you need to do with yourself on the road to keep you safe. So maybe you look behind you. You see that car coming. You look in front of you. I've got some room to move over, or I can tuck back into the shoulder. I can hug the white line. I'm good to go. Maybe you wave and then you move your bike over. The vehicle behind you, that driver has seen that you're working with them, sees that you're giving way, sees that you've acknowledged their presence. They give you a little extra space to pass. You guys have shared the road effectively. Or maybe that same driver's behind you. You look back, you see the driver back there. You look in front of you. And off to the right-hand side, about 50 yards up, you see this big blown out minefield of potholes. You can't possibly move over. In fact, you may have to move more into the center of the road. Now you might wave at that driver and you point, you indicate, just like you would if there was a cyclist behind you. Hey, there's a hazard ahead. And that vehicle behind you, they might not be able to see it yet, but they can see that you're trying to communicate something to them, that you're trying to indicate that you can't give way to that driver, that you're not just being an asshole sitting in the middle of the road blocking their path, that there's something that's obstructing your path so that you can't work with them. They've seen the good faith. And when you extend good faith as a cyclist to a driver out on the road, they're invariably going to reciprocate unless they're a complete psychopath. You're no longer going to be some anonymous, faceless ass in Lycra going down the road. You've looked at them. You've waved at them. You've given an indication. You've extended that good faith. And while they might feel a little inconvenienced by the fact that they have to move around, they might not be happy with the situation, it's very difficult to not reciprocate that good faith. So instead of vying for the same position, you are now sharing the road collaboratively. Two human beings instead of cyclist versus driver. And I can tell you anecdotally, since I've been using this device and have been able to employ that approach to riding on the roads and communicating with drivers instead of feeling defensive against them, I have almost eliminated aggressive drivers' attitudes and behaviors towards me because I'm in control. I've taken control. It's affected my confidence. It's affected my ability to deal with them. I'm going to initiate. I'm going to initiate that communication. They're going to see that I saw them. Even if I don't wave, they can see that I acknowledged them and I moved over, and they're going to give me the same grace and good faith. Hey, that cyclist is on the road. They see I'm just trying to get somewhere. I see that they don't have much area to go and ride in, so I'm going to give them a little extra space instead of buzzing by them. Is it going to eliminate all aggressive drivers? Of course not. Some people are just assholes. But it's really difficult when you lose that anonymity to be an exceptionally reckless and dangerous asshole. Now, let's say you do have a situation where there is some completely inattentive driver behind you. You look, you could see in the windshield maybe that some idiot's got their nose down in their cell phone, or they're not even in their lane. They're veering over to the right and they have no indication whatsoever that they're going to give way to you. Now you have a decision to make, but you have time, right? Maybe you gotta go ride off into the gutter. Maybe you gotta go ride in the grass. You might go down. You might even get a little bit injured. But it's in your control, you can brace for it, and it's a lot better to kind of go down and bump your rear end on the grass than it would be to get run down by a vehicle that is several tons, that is just not paying attention whatsoever. This thing can be an absolute game changer and can absolutely save your life without hyperbole whatsoever. But it's very simple. It's so simple a child can use it. It's going to show you on the screen after it gives you nice, obnoxious, audible beep that is clear and distinct from the other beeps that you might get from a device. And you're going to be able to look down and you're going to see there's a new border on the screen. And whether you're on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the road, you can change that setting for what side you want it to be on, depending on where you live. You're going to see a white dot that shows up at the very back of the screen. And that shows that it's entered your visual field or the radar field. And it's going to show that white dot moving and closing in on your position. And as it approaches the top of your screen, that means it's approaching a parallel position with you. And then it will come through and then off. And when that driver or that vehicle has passed you and it's no longer in the field behind you, it will change, it'll turn green for all clear, and then the borders will disappear. Now there's two different color schemes. There's orange that is going to kind of detect a typical differential in speed. So if you're riding on a road, let's say at 20 miles an hour and it's a 35 or 40 mile per hour road, that's a pretty typical differential. So the borders will show up in orange. It just is telling you that you can expect that the normal amount of reaction time is going to be available to you. But there's also a red mode where somebody might be closing up on you faster than is typically the case. That just tells you, hey, you have less time to respond. It doesn't even mean that the driver is doing anything wrong. You could be on a nice wide protected shoulder on a roadway that just has a higher speed limit. Or maybe you're going uphill, so your speed is substantially lower than the speed limit. It's just telling you, hey, this driver has entered your field. You're going to have a little less time react than usual, so you need to react right away, decide what you're going to do, move over, give the indication, whatever you need to do. It will also show you more than one vehicle on the screen at a time. So you have to maybe turn around and shoulder check that once, but sometimes you can't see all the way back. Well, you don't have to count those vehicles. You just have to make your decision, pick your line, and hold your line, and it will show you each dot for each vehicle that's behind you, and then once they've all passed, it will give you the all clear, and you know it might be a little bit safer to resume maybe a more central line in the road so you're not in kind of the gritty, usually messy, sometimes bombed out side of the road. Now, the reason I'm talking about this Garmin brand in particular is not because I'm beholden to Garmin. I'm not sponsored. They're not paying me to make this video, although Garmin, if you want to sponsor this channel and help an idiot out, I'm not going to say no. I like Garmin. I believe in you. Garmin fangirl. But there are no other brands that have entered this space. I find it absolutely stunning that these devices, or variants of this device, have been out since 2016, and no other cycling brand is entering this space. It's mind-numbing to me that not every cycling brand is in this space. No, I get it. Safety isn't sexy. It doesn't make you faster, right? It's very difficult for people to part with the dollar if it's not going to make them faster or make their rides more fun. It is so abundantly important that I think every cycling brand should be in this. Now, I know that there's the Cycleek out there. There's the Fly Series taillight with camera integration, and that helps to give you some recourse by taking video of vehicles and license plates in the case that maybe you are hurt or you are buzzed by some driver, you have some legal recourse. But I think that this device is far superior in that it is proactive. Right? Again, we're talking about being in command of the situation, making an active decision to put yourself in a situation that is more safe. A camera can't do that. It is very reactive. It's basically going to be used after something happens. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather avoid the accident to begin with. Now, if budget's no object, have both, right? Because there's going to be people who are just completely negligent, that even if you have this device and you try to make every decision in the world, something may still happen, but you are going to reduce that capacity by several orders of magnitude. It is going to be far less likely that if you're in control and can react to a situation in advance, that you're going to have an adverse reaction or adverse situation with the vehicle than if you didn't have the device at all. Now, there are two models of this device. This one here that I own is the RTL 515. RTL stands for rear tail light, and as you can see, there is a tail light built into this device. There is also the RVR 315, which is the radar only. Now, this device that I have costs $200. I think for the technology that's built into this and what it does, $200 is actually pretty fair of a price point. Garmin is not gouging on price here based on being the only brand in the market. I think that for what this thing does compared to other devices and other technologies that are out there for cycling, $200 is more than fair. It's a no-brainer. And yes, I get that $200 objectively is a lot of money, and it's not fun. Again, it's not sexy, but how much is your life worth? How much does it cost to go to an urgent care if you think that maybe you broke your hand after you get hit by a car? How much is an emergency room visit or physical therapy? If this can avoid even one adverse interaction with a vehicle that could get you hurt, it's more than paid for itself. But I get it. Everybody has a budget. And maybe you don't need a taillight. Maybe you have a nice expensive taillight that you're already using. That's where the RVR 315 comes into play, the radar only, no taillight attached, and that's $120. $120. That is a no-brainer. $120, why are you even still watching this video? Go pick one of these things up. That is the next thing you should be spending your money on if you ride outdoors, next to a helmet. It just, all the money that we spend on stupid shit as cyclists, $15 a month for programs like Zwift, indoor trainers, power meters, wheels, things that make us 1% more aero, bib shorts, all of these things. $120 to bucket something that's going to keep you safe seems rather short-sighted and silly to me. Now I'm going to talk specifically about this unit here, the 515 that I have with the taillight, and just understand that the 315 is going to have everything I just talked about with the radar, and it's just not going to have the tail light features that I'm going to talk about. But otherwise, they are the same device. So you're not losing any kind of range on the 315. It's not a lesser model from the radar perspective. It's literally just leaving out the tail light. Might be a little bit more cost effective. Just be aware that if you are going to go with the 315, just the radar, and you do use a tail light, you need to have the real estate for it on the back of your bike. I'll talk about that and mounting a little bit more in a few minutes. So this device here has 4 different light modes available in it, and I'm not going to shine this in your face so that you go blind, but the first mode is a solid mode, right? And this is just kind of like having a tail light on your car, right? Very bright, can be seen from about a mile back, and what happens is as a vehicle approaches you, this starts to flicker, so it changes the frequency or the pulsing of the light, so it grabs attention as the vehicle gets closer. That change in stimulus gives you better opportunity to be seen as a vehicle approaches. And this will give you about 6 hours of battery life in this mode. The next mode here is, I don't know if you can tell, it's very subtle here, kind of on top of my hand, but it reduces the number of lumens by a little bit more than half, and this is called Peloton mode. And this is intended for riding in a Peloton, so this is for group riding out there. And this is going to allow you to still have a taillight on, still use the radar, but not have to blind your friends, right? These are very bright LED lights, and we don't want to create a safety issue in a group of people by blinding them with the tail light. So this makes it much less bright so that you can ride with other people out on the road. And this is going to give you 8 hours of battery life. The next mode is called day flash mode, and you can probably discern here you've got a little bit of oscillation in the light frequency here, and this is going to give you about 16 hours of total battery life here. It's kind of your go all day mode here, and just a little bit of oscillation. It's something that can be seen so that you can be seen a little bit better, but it's meant for daytime riding. And the last mode here is night mode, and you can see it's kind of a very violent variable frequency pulsation of the light here. You can be seen, it's very bright. You don't want just a solid light at night because there's very little to delineate that from far away than a car's taillight or a motorcycle's taillight. So the flashing light makes it very clear that you are a cyclist and not some other type of vehicle with whom somebody is sharing the road, so people can use a little bit more caution there. And then if you have the 315, the radar only, you're going to get 7 hours of battery life. Now, it might seem a little counterintuitive to say, hey, well, I have the radar only. You'd think I have a huge advantage in terms of battery life, not just an hour over the solid mode. But you have to understand that the battery life is really directed by the radar and not by the taillight, right? If you've owned taillights with removable batteries in the past, you know that you can get upwards of like 100 hours on some of these. The LEDs don't take very much battery. It's the radar that's always on, that's always hunting. So you're only going to get about 7 hours on that device. But I do think the battery life is serviceable on these devices. Sure, in a perfect world, we'll enhance our capacity for the number of milliamp hours in a small package like this, but realistically, I think that if you come up with a good charging habit, like I think most people are charging their head units or computers or even your cell phone on a regular basis every ride or two, if you just pair that habit with the radar and your head unit, you're always going to have some kind of charge. And then if you're using that day flash mode with a total of 16 hours, it gives you a lot of battery life to work with. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about how the radar functionality works on these devices, because there's some nuances to it that make it very advantageous for cycling, that make it usable in all elements, whether you're riding in a group or riding solo, that a typical radar system wouldn't actually allow for. So this isn't going to send a radar like you would think of in air traffic control, just looking for any bogey, right? It's not just sending out a signal looking for something, anything out there. It's looking specifically for a differential in speed. So it's looking for something traveling with the same directionality as you, but overtaking you in terms of speed. So it's not going to pick up the pedestrian that you just passed. It's not going to pick up the car moving in the opposite direction. It's not going to pick up the squirrel crossing the road. And importantly, it is not going to be picking up the cyclist that you're riding with. So anything that's kind of traveling at your rate of speed or slower, that's kind of in that span, it's not going to pick that up because it doesn't want you to get a whole lot of false positives and desensitize you to that signal. It is specifically going to look for something that is expected to be a vehicle, something that can cause you risk, something that is going to overtake you and come into your plane. That's why it's looking for the differential in speed, which means that while you are riding with a group of cyclists, it will read the car from behind you. So somebody can use this device and keep their entire group of friends safe. In fact, you don't need to buy this for every member of your family. If you always ride with your spouse and you guys are always together, you don't need 2 of these. You just need 1. You can actually pair this up to 2 head units, and both of you can look at the same thing. Now, in terms of how I would evaluate the accuracy here, this thing is highly accurate. I have never, ever, ever had a car come by me that hasn't been picked up by this device, period. It catches everything. It gives me ample warning for everything. Sure, when a car kind of pulls in inside of that 140-meter window, yes, you'll have less time, but it has always picked up that vehicle. Now, in terms of false positives, you can get a false positive that isn't a false positive as much as it is, hey, it's putting out kind of a wide range, it's trying to pick up a wider road or winding roads, so you might catch maybe a railroad track and a train coming down that's adjacent to the road you're on. It might pick that up. It's better to look and to not need to than to not look when you need to, right? Or if you've got an adjacent parking lot or an adjacent roadway that's kind of close and in parallel, you might pick up vehicles that aren't really a risk to you. But again, it's better than having that kind of scope too narrow and missing something as there's kind of changes in direction in the road. In terms of false negatives, the only window where you would have something in your field that this isn't going to pick up is, like I said, if something is going the same speed. So what may happen is there might be a car behind you going the same speed as you are, as it kind of comes into your field, and then maybe they've got to slow down and go at the same speed or slower than you are because there's oncoming traffic. It's not going to be picked up in the radar. But at that point, you've already shoulder checked, you've already been made aware of that vehicle, you're aware of its presence, but the radar is not picking it up as a risk anymore because it's at the same speed. I think that that's perfectly acceptable within the design. It's not really missing the car as much as it is using that kind of technology. If not, you'd have a whole ton of false positives. And when you have too many false positives, you're no longer as reactive to the device as you should be. Now, I do have one major criticism of this device, and it has nothing to do with its function. It has to do with mounting. It has to do with how you're going to mount this to your bike. And I just want to let people know about this out in advance so that they can plan for it. It's certainly not insurmountable, but it is something that's kind of a little bit fiddly that I think that Garmin really needs to address in future models. But when it comes to Garmin, they always give a ton of mounts, right? They've given, in this case, they've given you several different mounts. So the way that this device functions is the typical quarter turn mount, right? Just like you have on a head unit or kind of a handlebar mount, right? So that you just kind of give that quarter twist so it makes it a quick release so that you can take things on and off your bike and charge them easily, which I think is a brilliant use case for this device, right? If we need to charge this as often as our computer, we don't want to be screwing around with hook and loop tape or some of those crank-on clamps. This is a perfect solution. And they've gone ahead and they've included 3 different types of mounts. So this is intended to go on your seat tube, and they've included more squared off mount here, something for a more round seat tube, or something for a more aerodynamic and maybe triangular seat tube. So you basically just kind of lock this into place here. It mates around the back of your seat tube, and then you use the included rubber band. It cinches on nice and tight, and it's nice and secure on your seat tube. It's a perfect solution, except for those people who use a saddlebag. And most people I know use a saddlebag. And a lot of people put their taillights on their saddlebag. That's why most saddlebags these days have included a little bit of a loop or a strap in the back on which you can clip some kind of typical taillight. Well, for whatever reason, Garmin has not anticipated that and has not included any type of mounting solution for that use case. I know that there are aftermarket mounts out there. There's 3D printed clip mounts that you can use with the quarter turn. You can use a mount that you can put on kind of your saddle rails. People have fashioned or engineered solutions with long brackets. They've drilled holes into their saddlebags. But if you're not particularly handy or you're not keen on spending $30 to $50 for some aftermarket 3D printed mount, you can feel like kind of you're a little bit left in the lurch. And if you take a look at kind of the real estate that we have here, right? Now this bike in particular, this is an aero frame. So you have a much flatter top tube here. And this takes up a lot of real estate when you have a saddlebag on here, right? I don't have any room down here. I couldn't mount this down here if I wanted to, right? It wouldn't really fit. Now on a climbing bike with a more sloped top tube, I have a little bit more room, but even still, you're kind of tucking that light underneath this bag, and you're throwing off the angle of view, especially when you're talking about a taillight. When you're using a taillight, you want to put it up and as far back as possible so that that can be seen by the drivers. Now, this might be a workable solution if you have the real estate for the radar only. You can see even here for me though, it is a little bit tight, so you have to keep that in mind if you're getting the 315 model. Make sure you have enough room. But when you have the taillight model, you're gonna wanna push this up and back, and you're gonna wanna be able to mount that on a saddlebag. But Garmin has not included a solution for that. So what I ended up doing is coming up with a free solution for my own use, and I actually used one of these here. And this is one of the many of these just kind of handlebar mounts that I've gotten over the years with computers and watches from Garmin. Really cheap things that they kind of throw in with all of their devices. And it's got the little 4 corner tabs on there. And what I did is I took one of the thicker rubber bands, and you can kind of see in here that I've taken these rubber bands and I fed that rubber band through the strap and hooked it around all 4 corners. And this thing is on there. Like, I'm tugging at the rubber band. Like, I really have to consciously pull this out from around the corner to have that let go. It's on there nice and secure, and just putting the unit on here is just going to add more tension to it and make sure that this is tighter. Those rubber bands are really strong. They're designed to keep the devices on handlebars and on seat tubes for a long time to come. They usually give you a bunch of spares, and it's ended up being a perfect solution. So now it's just kind of right here on my saddlebag. I can either put it kind of upwards or downwards or vice versa. It really doesn't matter. It's kind of 6 of 1. But now this light is far back behind me, behind my seat, behind the saddlebag, nothing throwing off the angle of view when it comes to my tail light. And it's really the perfect solution. And it was free for me, but even if you don't have those things laying around, I actually found one on Amazon. It was like 10 bucks. You can pick one of these things up. Comes with a couple extra rubber bands. That's probably a little bit more money than these things are worth, but I've seen these at other retailers out there as well. It's like 2 or 3 of these for 10 bucks. You can probably check on eBay. Hell, you can probably even call up Garmin and they can send it to you for a nominal cost, I'm sure. But if you're gonna just kind of order this easy and friction-free from Amazon and use 2-day shipping, you can pick one of these up for 10 bucks. It's a perfectly good solution. It'll last a long time. I've never broken one of these. I think that they're fine, but take a look. If you've purchased any kind of head unit or watch from even any of the brands, it's pretty commonplace to include some mounts like these. You may already have a solution like this laying around. So just something to be aware of so that you don't order this and have it show up and then have no way to mount it, or feel like you have to take the saddlebag off your bike just to use the seat tube mount. So I don't personally use the seat tube mount. If you're gonna use the radar, that's probably an option that you can use this and put this under your saddlebag if you have the real estate for it. But I thought it would be worth mentioning that piece because it is an important part of the equation as to how you're going to mount it. Now, the last big question that you might be asking is compatibility. Do you have to have a Garmin computer to use this device? And the answer is no. Garmin has put this on an open protocol since the beginning. Basically, all of the manufacturers of different head units need to integrate that technology, some way to use that signal, and most of them have. I know that Wahoo has, the Hammerhead Karoo, both models have the ability to use the radar unit in much the same way, the same kind of visual interface. Stages, computers have made that available. If you use a cell phone, the Ride with GPS app also has an integration. You can pair with the radar that way. If you don't use a head unit or some kind of application to map your rides, but you still find this appealing and you want to use it without buying another standalone device to read the signal that Garmin does have available, there's a free application that can be used on your cell phone. It's called the Varia app. It just gives you a very simple user interface. It shows you on the road, and it will show any of the bogies or vehicles as they come into your field of view there, so that you can use that so that you can stay safe. A really neat feature that it has as well is if you are using headphones while you're riding, it will play those auditory sounds through your headphones to just give you an extra measure of safety. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the desire to go on some lecture or diatribe down below talking about how unsafe it is to ride with headphones, please spare us that exercise. Things have changed in the past several years. There are ways to ride safely with headphones, including open ear bone conduction headphones, or some of the sound isolating technology in the headphones that allows you to block out things like wind noise while isolating and amplifying sounds like voices and cars. That's a decision that each person needs to make depending on the technology they have available and their type of riding. There's no reason to go down and accost people for their personal choices. Agree to disagree and leave it at that. I won't be entertaining those comments. I don't think that that's necessary for here. Just kind of, let people do what they need to do and just understand that this is a net benefit when it comes to a safety feature. But I cannot recommend this device enough. I hope that by now, through all of this talking and all of this selling for a device that's not going to pay me a dime for selling it, is going to really extol the virtues of this particular device. It's an absolute game changer. I will never ride without one of these again. The fact that I waited as long as I did to get into one of these devices and didn't get one until the 3rd generation, in retrospect, is so silly to me. I haven't seen a single person that regrets buying this device. I don't regret buying it. I don't ever want to ride without it again. For me, the biggest thing is confidence. It has absolutely changed the game in terms of the confidence and my sense of control. I like to control what I can control, and I like one of those things to be my health and my well-being. So I am extremely satisfied with my own purchase. I highly recommend you guys take a look at this device and really consider buying this. I think this should be the next thing after your helmet that you invest in when it comes to cycling and your safety. I'm going to leave some links down below. I'm just going to leave basic Amazon links. It makes it really easy to kind of look at some of the features, specification, check out a couple reviews, some pictures, all of that fun stuff. I'll also leave the link down there for this little, this guy here in case you want to pair that up for the extra 10 bucks so that you're ready to go when one comes in. By all means, support your local bike shop or any type of online retailer that you prefer. The only thing I will caution you against is to make sure when you're looking at these devices, there's the 515 and then there's the 510, and that's the generation back. And this was kind of a refreshed model. And what they did with the 515 and the 315 is they added the Bluetooth capability. And then in the 515, it added that Peloton light mode that I showed you. In the 510, don't have that Bluetooth connectivity to it, but there's no discount on those devices. At least when I checked before making this video, it's the same price for both the 515 and as it is for the 510. So don't pick up the wrong device and pass up some of the value, right? You're gonna get more value for your dollar by going with the newer model. And if you're gonna use it with a cell phone, you're really gonna want that Bluetooth connectivity. It's not going to work unless you have an ANT Plus capable cell phone. So make sure you don't pick up the wrong model. Now, if you don't need the Bluetooth capability and for some reason you're able to find something with a substantial discount, by all means, the 510 work perfectly well. The radar technology has remained the same, but to get the most bang for your buck, go with the 515 or 315 model. I'll leave those links down below. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about the device, please feel free to leave that down below. I'll do my best to help you guys out more down there. Hit the thumbs up for safety. Don't thumbs down safety. That's not right, man. It's not cool. Safety is good. It's good stuff. I'll leave a couple more videos over here somewhere. Subscribe if you haven't already. All of the things, all of the stuff. Be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.